The year is 476 AD, or perhaps it is 455 AD, or maybe even earlier. Time, as you know, is not always precise, and neither, it seems, are empires. This is the story of the fall of the Roman Empire. But do not worry. There will be no battles, no sudden twists of heroism, only the slow, inevitable drift of history and the gentle decay of things once considered eternal. Welcome, dear friend. Before we continue, I want to encourage you to tell me where you are from. And, of course, to get comfortable where you are as the gentle waves of the fall of the Roman Empire causes you to drift away. Do not forget to subscribe so you can get more of this kind of content. We begin, as all stories of empires do, with a map. A very large map. Imagine, if you will, the Italian peninsula, long, thin, and somewhat uncomfortable for marching legions. To the north, forests that smell faintly of damp earth. To the south, the warm, lazy waters of the Mediterranean. Almost like a bath, if Rome had the time to notice. The city itself, Rome, was crowded, very crowded, and dusty, always dusty. Dust and perhaps a hint of mold. Now imagine this empire, sprawling, too large to manage. And like any large household, it had problems, mundane problems. Taxes, food shortages, arguments over who gets the best toga. And now, let us drift slowly through time. Not to witness great battles, nor heroic speeches, nor sudden destruction. We journey through the subtle, the mundane, the repetitive, the slow decline of Rome. Coins miscounted, grain delayed, letters lost, scholars distracted, emperors distracted, borders tense. The machinery of empire creaks quietly and the story unfolds. Gently, imperceptibly, hypnotically. Imagine yourself seated in a quiet room, candle flickering, soft air around you. Rome appears before your mind's eye. Not in chaos, but in calm decay. And as you listen, perhaps your own mind drifts, gently, toward rest. Chapter 1. The Slow Grind of Administration. Ah, Rome. You have heard of it, of course. Perhaps in passing, in stories of grandeur and marble columns, of generals and battles. But let us step quietly behind the curtains, into the lesser-known corridors. The corridors where history drifts slowly, like dust in sunlight. This is where the story begins. Not with triumph, not with glory, but with administration, bureaucracy, paperwork, and yes, tedium. Imagine, if you can, the great city itself, not in snapshots of triumph, but in its daily rhythms. A clerk scratching letters onto a wax tablet, another tallying the shipments of grain, a messenger riding slowly from Ostia to the Forum, panting slightly, stopping every few minutes to sip water from a clay jar. And the citizens? Most are too busy to notice. They wake, they eat, they walk, they argue about taxes. The empire stretches across continents, but it begins here, in small, precise movements, in small, almost imperceptible actions. And so the machinery of Rome moves. Slowly, like a cart trudging through mud, wheels creaking. But unlike a cart, the machinery does not break, not all at once. It falters gradually, imperceptibly, and therein lies suspense. The suspense of inevitability. Perhaps you feel it even now, as you imagine the scrolls and ledgers piling up on desks, unending, unremarkable, and yet quietly powerful. Let us pause briefly at a single desk. The scribe sits, quill in hand. His ink is dark and thick. He scratches carefully, almost meditatively. Each symbol etched onto parchment represents a shipment of grain, a tally of soldiers, a note of tax collected from a distant province. Each stroke seems insignificant, but together, they maintain the pulse of an empire. And yet, a single mistake, an extra stroke, a misplaced mark, can ripple outward. The weight of consequence is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet always present. The scribe pauses. Perhaps he wipes sweat from his brow, although he works indoors. Perhaps he sharpens his quill, tapping it gently against the edge of a stone desk. Each tiny action, repetitive, mundane, contributes to the slow unraveling, or continuation, of Rome. He may not notice it. You may not notice it. But the empire's fate is contained in these quiet gestures. We move now, slowly, to the warehouses. Imagine Rome's granaries, tall stone structures, quiet except for the occasional scraping of wooden carts. Grain sacks line the walls, stacked high, dust rising with every footstep. Overseers walk along the aisles, counting, checking, occasionally scratching a note onto a tablet. Nothing dramatic occurs. Occasionally, a rat might scuttle across a beam, or a crate might shift slightly. Small tensions, small moments of suspense in an otherwise monotonous existence. Coins clink. Tax collectors arrive, pausing to wipe sweat, inspecting ledgers. They debate, politely, the amount owed by a merchant from Gaul. Perhaps the merchant is nervous. Perhaps the collector is bored. And slowly, ever so slowly, these exchanges shape the empire. They determine whether a legion will march or idle, whether a bridge will be repaired or crumble. And yet, to the untrained eye, nothing happens. Only the slow tick of bureaucracy, the whisper of ink on parchment, the faint smell of dust and grain. It is tempting to dismiss such minutiae as boring. And indeed it is. But it is here, in the mundane, that Rome's fall quietly begins to whisper. A small error in counting, a delayed shipment, a ledger misplaced, and the empire bends, little by little. And what of communication? Letters carried across the empire, delivered by horse, by foot, by river. Slow rivers, muddy and calm, carrying small messages that will change nothing, or perhaps everything. A report delayed by a day may cause a legion to idle, or a shipment of coins lost in transit may result in a delayed payment. And so, the empire falters, imperceptibly, predictably. Suspense lingers here, almost too subtle to notice. Will the message arrive? Will Rome survive another day? Perhaps, perhaps not. But the scribe does not care. The granary official does not care. And you may begin to feel your eyes heavy. History is rarely loud. It is rarely dramatic. It is administrative. And this is its charm. It is slow, and yet quietly the machinery of empires turns toward decay. Let us now imagine a council room. Not a grand hall of marble, but a smaller, quieter space, suffused with the faint scent of wax and wood polish. Officials gather. They speak in measured tones. One reports the shipment of olive oil delayed from Hispania. Another notes a tax dispute in Britannia. One might imagine tension, drama, but there is none. Only the careful, repetitive exchange of facts. Decisions are made slowly. Often, no decision is made at all. A young clerk fidgets with his quill. A candle flickers. A faint scratching of sanded floors echoes from the corridor. Hours pass. Minutes stretch. The council adjourns. No empire rises or falls in these moments, yet they accumulate. Each discussion, each pause is a thread in the slowly unraveling tapestry of Rome. You might wonder, What is suspense here? Perhaps the answer is in the delays themselves. A decision deferred may have consequences years later, hidden, imperceptible, but real, like a small crack in the foundation of a villa. Nothing falls immediately, but eventually, it may. And now, the archives. Endless corridors lined with scrolls, ancient ledgers stacked in towers. Each scroll contains a name, a date, a shipment, a payment, a note of some inconsequential dispute. The archivist moves slowly along these aisles. Dust rises with each step. The light is dim. He pulls a scroll, unrolls it carefully, reads it, murmurs something incomprehensible, and then places it back. Perhaps the scroll speaks of grain miscounted in gall. Perhaps it records the delayed arrival of a shipment of wine from Hispania. Perhaps it merely notes that someone sneezed on a warm afternoon. None of this seems urgent. And yet, collectively, these small details form the nervous system of an empire. And it is in these details that the seeds of decline are sown. Consider for a moment a single miscounted sack of grain. It seems trivial. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 shipments contains an error. And yet the effect is cumulative. A legion marches, expecting provisions that are slightly less than promised. Another shipment is delayed. A village protests taxes. Another ledger is lost. Slowly, quietly, the structure falters. What of the messengers? Rome is vast. Messages must travel across mountains, rivers, and deserts. A letter sent from Carthage may arrive in Rome weeks later. Perhaps it is lost. Perhaps it is delayed. Perhaps the courier stops to rest or to argue with a local innkeeper over payment. These small interruptions, they seem inconsequential, but the empire notices, or rather, it fails to notice in time. We might imagine a messenger on a dusty road. The sun beats down. He wipes sweat from his brow. His horse plods along, hooves stirring small clouds of dust. A bridge ahead is damaged. He must wait. Hours pass. Perhaps bandits are rumored nearby. He moves cautiously. Each pause, each minor obstacle, carries the faint thrill of suspense. Will the message arrive? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. And so Rome's fate is not decided in grand battles, but in quiet uncertainties, small errors, small delays, small distractions, all adding together imperceptibly. Administration, as we see, is not glamorous, but it is powerful, and it is fallible. A single governor may misplace a report, another may overestimate tax collections, a third may fail to repair a bridge on schedule. Each action, mundane. Each error, almost invisible. Yet together, they shape the course of history. We might pause to reflect on the subtlety of this decay. Rome did not fall because of a single mistake. It fell because of thousands of tiny mistakes, repeated, unnoticed, accepted as ordinary. And this is where suspense becomes quiet meditation. We wonder, which small error will prove decisive? Will it be the miscounted coin? The delayed shipment? Or the lost letter from Britannia? You may find yourself lulled by these small, repetitive details. That is intentional. History, when observed in minutiae, is almost hypnotic. And so we return finally to the clerk. Imagine him hunched over his desk once more, scratching ink onto parchment. Perhaps he pauses to sigh, or to glance out the window at the city. Perhaps he notices a small rat scurrying across the floor. He does not react. He continues his work. And you may feel your own eyelids growing heavy. The suspense of Rome's slow decline is subtle. It is not a sword flashing in sunlight. It is a candle guttering faintly in the night. It is a single miscounted grain, a single delayed message, a single scroll misplaced. And yet, collectively, these small, almost imperceptible events shape the destiny of an empire. History, in its quietest moments, is profoundly boring, and yet profoundly hypnotic. Chapter 2. Emperors Slowly Losing Interest. Ah, the emperors. Figures of power, we are told. Figures of history whose names are remembered, or at least recorded in books. And yet, let us approach them not in moments of triumph, but in their quiet, ordinary hours. For empires often falter not in battles, but in the slow waning of interest, in the gentle neglect of duty, in the repetitive, mundane rhythms of life at court. Imagine, if you can, an emperor rising from bed. Perhaps he is Honorius, perhaps Valentinian III, perhaps a less memorable name lost to the dust of history. He stretches, yawns, and considers what to wear. A toga, carefully folded, or a simpler tunic. Such are the decisions that occupy his morning. There is a mirror, perhaps, but its reflection offers little insight. Outside, the city hums. Inside, the palace breathes slowly, as if waiting, expectantly, for something to happen. We begin with morning rituals. Breakfast is modest. Perhaps bread, perhaps olives, perhaps a cup of watered wine. Courtiers whisper. Attendants move with careful precision. One might imagine the emperor sipping, slowly, perhaps glancing at a ledger, perhaps watching a messenger arrive from a distant province. Nothing dramatic occurs. Yet, every small action shapes the day. A delayed audience, a misplaced letter, a forgotten decree. These are the invisible gears of history. Sometimes the emperor writes. Sometimes he reads poetry. Perhaps he pauses, reflecting on lines of verse. Perhaps a thought drifts to Gaul, or Hispania, or a grain shipment he forgot to authorize. These small lapses, trivial in the moment, gather quietly over weeks, months, years. And thus, Rome bends almost imperceptibly under the weight of inattention. Consider the suspense here. Minor, imperceptible, but present. Will he remember to meet the governor? Will the letter reach the Senate? Perhaps, or perhaps not. And history waits. Silently, patiently, as always. And now, the court? Imagine a room filled with advisors, clerks, and servants. The emperor listens. He nods occasionally. He may forget small details. Another advisor repeats them. A debate unfolds. It is quiet, long, repetitive. Perhaps a minor disagreement about taxes or the repair of a distant bridge. Perhaps a miscounted legion in Pannonia. The stakes seem enormous. Yet the proceedings are, in fact, lethargic. One can imagine the emperor glancing at a tapestry, perhaps noticing the faded threads, pondering their meaning or not. He is distracted by a buzzing fly, by the sunlight on the marble, by the faint scent of incense. Meanwhile, the wheels of empire turn, slowly, imperfectly, almost lethargically. Will the council resolve its dispute? Will the emperor notice the problem? Perhaps, perhaps not. And in this uncertainty, we feel the quiet suspense of history itself. Let us pause to consider leisure. Rome's emperors had many distractions: hunting, poetry, music, banquets, perhaps a board game, perhaps a philosophical debate. And in these moments, nothing appears consequential. Yet even leisure shapes history. A day spent in poetry is a day a letter remains unread. A day hunting is a day a decree is delayed. each seemingly insignificant decision accumulates, and the empire waits. Let us now walk with the emperor through a day: morning rituals, council meetings, afternoon leisure, evening banquets, perhaps a stroll in the palace gardens, noting which flowers bloom and which wither. Nothing seems urgent. Yet, in each step, each breath, each glance at a document, the empire slowly moves toward its destiny. Each small choice, each moment of distraction, each glance at a tapestry instead of a ledger matters. And you, listening now, may begin to notice the quiet hypnotic rhythm, the slow unfolding of small mundane events. Each minor detail contributes to the gentle, inevitable decline. And perhaps sleep begins to approach, quietly, unobtrusively, like a messenger delivering the last letter of the day. We might imagine an emperor seated in a quiet courtyard listening to a lute player. Perhaps he sips wine. Perhaps he nods slowly or hums along softly. He is calm. He is content. Yet beneath the calm, small errors, minor delays, forgotten shipments all gather quietly, like dust in an abandoned room. And the suspense, subtle, imperceptible, lingers. Which minor neglect will tip the scales? History does not tell us immediately. It waits, patiently. Consider for a moment a minor error: a ledger misplaced, a message delayed, a governor ignored. Perhaps the emperor forgets to authorize a shipment of grain. Nothing dramatic occurs immediately. No battle is lost. No city burns. Yet, these small oversights accumulate. They gather silently, shaping the empire in ways no one notices. And here, we find suspense that is subtle, almost hypnotic. It is not a sword at the throat, but a ticking clock, slow, deliberate, almost imperceptible. History, observed in these small errors, is soothing, yet it is full of quiet tension. Each oversight, each delay, might matter, or might not. But we imagine, and in imagining, we feel the gentle pull of inevitability. And so we leave our emperor seated in the fading light of the day. Perhaps he will remember the neglected ledger tomorrow. Perhaps he will forget it again. Perhaps an unexpected visitor will arrive, carrying news from the north. The Goths, the Vandals, a shipment of gold lost at sea. We do not know. The suspense lingers, quiet, gentle, almost imperceptible. And you may feel your own heartbeat slow, your mind drifting toward calm, toward rest. History unfolds slowly. Emperors rise and fall, sometimes unnoticed. And in the gaps between decisions, between thoughts, between breaths, the empire bends quietly toward its end. Chapter 3: Economic Decline. And now, let us consider Rome's wealth, or perhaps its lack thereof. An empire is not maintained by armies alone. It is maintained by coins, grain, taxes, trade, ledgers, and the slow, careful counting of small, seemingly insignificant details. And when these details falter, the consequences ripple. Quietly, slowly, inexorably. Imagine, if you can, a Roman marketplace. Cobblestone streets, worn smooth by centuries of sandals. Merchants call out softly, selling olives, wine, cloth. A cart rattles past, its wheels uneven, a crate shifting with a dull thud. Coins clink. A coin falls to the ground, unnoticed by all but you, the observer. And perhaps this small, ordinary sound echoes through the empire in ways no one recognizes. Let us begin with coinage. Rome relied upon coins, silver and bronze, stamped with images of emperors long forgotten. A scribe records every minting. Coins are distributed to provinces, soldiers are paid, taxes are collected, and yet The silver gradually diminishes. Coins are debased. Perhaps a little less silver this year, perhaps a little more bronze. To the untrained eye, a trivial matter. To the empire, a silent erosion. The subtle suspense lies in uncertainty. Will a merchant in Carthage accept these new coins? Will a soldier grumble at receiving slightly less than he expects? Perhaps he will. Perhaps he will not. And in these tiny, mundane variations, the empire shifts almost imperceptibly toward decline. Consider the meticulous process of minting coins. Workers strike metal discs again and again in rhythm. The hammering is hypnotic, repetitive. Dust rises, sweat glistens on their brows. Perhaps a die cracks. Perhaps a worker misaligns a stamp. Each small imperfection, unnoticed, contributes to the quiet instability of Rome's wealth. Money is not enough. An empire needs sustenance. Grain flows from Egypt, from North Africa, from Sicily. It travels slowly, by ship, by cart, by river. Each shipment carefully recorded, weighed, counted. And yet, sometimes it is delayed. A storm, a broken cartwheel, a miscalculation, and suddenly, a city feels the absence of bread. The baker hesitates. The market slows. Citizens murmur. And still the empire continues, oblivious, almost indifferent. Imagine a Roman ship sailing down the Nile loaded with grain. The sun beats down. Sailors adjust the rigging. A rope frays. A small hole forms in a barrel. Perhaps one sack of grain will spoil. Perhaps two. Each minor mishap may seem insignificant, but collectively they form the beginnings of scarcity. And in scarcity, there is tension. Not the flash of a sword, but the subtle tightening of an unseen cord. And yet, the merchants continue. They weigh, they count, they haggle. Each small exchange repetitive, almost hypnotic. A coin here, a sack of grain there, and slowly. The rhythm of trade falters, slowed by errors, delays, and human oversight. And then there are taxes. Collected by messengers, scribes, and local governors, provinces submit tribute. Perhaps gold, perhaps silver, perhaps olive oil or wheat or wine. The amounts are meticulously recorded. Ledgers are checked, rechecked. Occasionally, miscalculations occur. Perhaps one province is overtaxed, another undertaxed. Perhaps a governor pockets a small portion. No one notices immediately. No alarms sound. And yet, these small discrepancies accumulate, imperceptibly shaping the empire's decline. Imagine a Roman tax collector walking through a provincial village. Children run past, kicking dust. A farmer hesitates, counting coins carefully. The collector scribbles numbers onto a tablet. A goat wanders into the square, knocking over a basket of coins. They scramble to gather them. Hours pass. The day stretches. Nothing monumental occurs. And yet, in the rhythm of this mundane process, the fate of Rome inches forward, quietly, inexorably. Will the province meet its quota? Will the coins arrive in time to pay the legion? Perhaps, or perhaps not. And the empire waits patiently, as always. Coins lose value. Grain shipments falter, taxes are delayed, and slowly inflation creeps in. Prices rise, subtly, imperceptibly. A loaf of bread costs slightly more. A tunic slightly more. Perhaps a soldier grumbles quietly. Perhaps not. Citizens adapt, slowly, reluctantly. The economy slows. Trade contracts. Markets once vibrant become quieter, more subdued. And in this quiet, the pulse of the empire weakens. Consider the subtle anxiety of a market square. Merchants shuffle goods. Buyers count coins carefully. Conversations repeat, polite but cautious. A barrel of wine is lighter than expected. A sack of grain is slightly spoiled. Nothing dramatic. And yet, collectively, these small imperfections accumulate. And here, we feel suspense in the ordinary, tension in the mundane, anticipation in the slow rhythm of daily commerce. One missed payment, one delayed shipment, one miscounted coin. Each action, almost trivial in isolation, has consequences that radiate through the empire. Governors argue over accounts. Soldiers are underpaid. Cities experience shortages. Bridges remain unrepaired. Roads crumble. And yet, no one panics. No one notices, not immediately. Only history notices, slowly, quietly, as the empire bends under the weight of small, mundane, repeated errors. And here, a minor cliffhanger arises. Will the next shipment arrive intact? Will the collector bring the correct amount of tribute? Will Rome's coffers hold enough silver to pay the legions stationed in distant provinces? We do not know. Yet. And this is what keeps history hypnotically alive. And so, the empire's economy declines, not with a dramatic collapse, but with gentle erosion. Coins wear thin, ledgers misalign, grain spoils in quiet warehouses, markets slow, trade falters, taxes are delayed. And through it all, life continues. People eat, merchants trade, children run, officials count, scribes write. Nothing is urgent, nothing is sudden. And yet, slowly, inexorably, the empire falters. And perhaps as you listen, you notice a subtle calm settling over your mind. The repetitive details, the slow rhythm of bureaucracy, commerce and tribute, hypnotic, meditative. The suspense, quiet, gentle, lulls you toward rest. Chapter 4, Barbarian Encroachments. And now, we turn our attention to the northern borders, forests, rivers, hills, and mountains, lands that the Romans called barbarian. Tribes of Goths, Vandals, Huns, Franks, names that echo softly through history. Yet, let us approach them slowly, quietly, almost reverently, for the story of Rome's decline is often not one of violent clashes alone, but of slow, imperceptible pressure, of waiting, of tension stretching quietly across decades. Imagine a forest at dawn. Mist clings to the trees. Birds stir softly. A horse shifts its weight. Perhaps a scout rides along a dirt path, barely audible, observing the horizon. No banners fly. No swords flash. Only quiet movement. Yet these small stirrings, these slight tensions, ripple slowly toward Rome, like a stone tossed into a still pond. Let us consider a small tribe, the Visigoths, perhaps. They move slowly, thoughtfully, across forests and rivers. They are not in a hurry. Perhaps a few scouts ride ahead. Perhaps elders pause to confer about where to camp. Children follow, carrying small bundles. Fires are lit at dusk. The smoke rises, thin and almost invisible. A Roman border watch may notice. Perhaps it reports. Perhaps it forgets. And in this uncertainty, we feel the quiet suspense of history. The empire often underestimated these movements, not because it lacked intelligence, but because bureaucracy is slow, reports are delayed, letters misfiled, governors distracted by taxes, grain shortages, coin shortages, minor matters that seem trivial in isolation. And yet, collectively, they determine Rome's response, or lack thereof. Now, consider the Roman frontier. Watchtowers line the borders. A legionary peers through a narrow slit in the stone, scanning forests and hills. He notes a small column of riders far in the distance. Perhaps he writes a report. Perhaps he hesitates. Perhaps he forgets to send it. Days pass. Weeks pass. By the time the report reaches the governor, the scene may have shifted slightly. Small delays, subtle misjudgments, and the tension of the empire grows quietly, imperceptibly. Observe the repetition. The watchtower stands unchanged. The river flows slowly beneath it. Birds circle lazily overhead. And yet, small changes occur. The line of smoke from a distant fire drifts further. Horses shift in the grass. Every tiny movement carries weight, and the empire waits. Not for a sudden storm, but for the slow, quiet ripple of minor disturbances. Occasionally, a small raid occurs. Perhaps a village along the border is raided, livestock taken, minor damage to property. No grand battle, no dramatic heroism, just disruption. Farmers grumble, taxes are delayed. The governor sends a minor report. Rome acknowledges it. Eventually. And in these small, repetitive disturbances, the empire bends slowly, almost without noticing. Imagine the quiet suspense of a farmer watching a small column of riders in the distance. He does not scream. He does not flee. He merely notes carefully that something has changed. Perhaps a cow is missing. Perhaps a crate of grain. Nothing monumental. And yet, each tiny disruption adds to the slow erosion of stability. The Romans often attempted diplomacy. Envoys sent to barbarian tribes, gifts, promises, treaties. And yet, these messages travel slowly. Perhaps a letter is delayed. Perhaps an envoy misinterprets instructions. Perhaps a gift arrives late or damaged. And so, small misunderstandings accumulate quietly, imperceptibly. Rome reacts, always just a little too late. Consider a Roman envoy traveling through a forest. He carries a small chest of coins or jewelry, meant as a gesture of peace. He pauses at a river, the current slow, glimmering under the sun. Perhaps he misjudges a crossing. Perhaps he rests too long. Weeks pass. Meanwhile, the empire waits, and the suspense is quiet, almost hypnotic. Will the gift reach its destination? Will peace hold for another week, another month? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Further east, the Huns move silently across the plains. Small tribes scatter, flee, or ally themselves with larger neighbors. Their movements are slow, almost imperceptible to the empire, which is distracted by its own small errors, ledgers, and coinage. Yet these pressures build, steadily, like water eroding stone. One small migration, another minor settlement abandoned, a faint rumor, and the empire feels tension without seeing its source. We might imagine a Hun leader sitting by a campfire at night. He sharpens a spear. Children sleep. Fires crackle softly. The moon glimmers on distant hills. Nothing dramatic. Yet this calm masks the gradual, inexorable pressure moving slowly toward Rome. And the suspense, subtle, gentle, persists. And so, Rome's borders feel pressure. Not sudden, not dramatic, but persistent. Forests, rivers, mountains, and plains all harbor movements that stretch the empire thin. Tribes approach slowly. Scouts ride, envoys travel. Minor raids occur. Gifts are delayed. Letters lost. And throughout all of this, Rome reacts with gentle lethargy. Its machinery slowed by bureaucracy, distracted by grain, coins, taxes, small errors, almost imperceptibly. And so the question arises, will a minor oversight allow a tribe to advance further than expected? Will Rome send help in time? Perhaps, perhaps not. And as you listen, you may feel yourself drifting, carried along by the slow, repetitive rhythm of history itself. Chapter 5. Cultural Decay. And now we drift into the quieter corridors of Rome. Not the streets, not the granaries, not the palaces, but the libraries, the lecture halls, the spaces where knowledge once flourished. For empires, like cities, are measured not only by walls or armies, but by the life of the mind. And when the mind slows, when attention drifts, when curiosity wanes, the empire bends, slowly, imperceptibly, quietly. Imagine a library, tall shelves of scrolls stacked carefully, some leaning precariously. Dust hangs in the sunlight streaming through narrow windows. A single scholar moves along the aisles, fingers brushing the spines, unrolling a scroll, reading quietly. He pauses. Perhaps a line of poetry catches his eye. Perhaps a historical account. Perhaps a mathematical diagram. And yet, fewer scholars arrive each day. Fewer scrolls are copied. The fire of learning dims softly, almost unnoticed. Rome's libraries, once vibrant, are now subdued. Scrolls decay in quiet corners. Wax tablets are lost. Scholars move slowly, often distracted by more mundane concerns. Grain shipments, taxes, imperial decrees. The scent of dust and ink fills the air. Candles flicker. A single draft passes through a window, rustling pages. Nothing dramatic occurs. No fire, no invasion, only slow neglect. And yet, the slow decline of knowledge mirrors the slow decline of the empire itself. Consider a scholar unrolling a scroll. He reads about an event centuries past. Perhaps he notes a mistake. Perhaps he does not. Hours pass. He sighs, adjusts his chair, scribbles a marginal note. The empire outside continues, unaware of this quiet, meticulous act. And this is the gentle suspense of history, not in swords or horses, but in ink, dust, and fading memory. And now, let us move to the lecture halls. Philosophers gather. They speak in heated debate, perhaps on ethics, perhaps on mathematics, perhaps on history itself. Their voices echo loudly across stone walls. Students listen. Some take notes, some fidget. Arguments repeat, circling familiar points. Nothing dramatic, no sudden revelation. And yet, the persistence of debate maintains a fragile thread of intellectual life. Occasionally, a philosopher poses a question with gentle suspense. Will the student understand? Will the argument be resolved? Perhaps not. Days pass. The same questions echo in slightly different forms. Knowledge continues, slowly but with diminished vigor. And outside the lecture halls, the empire struggles to maintain cohesion, distracted by its smaller, practical concerns. Let us now wander through the city itself. Temples, statues, mosaics. Some are maintained, some crumble slowly. Craftsmen once dedicated to perfection now move more slowly, distracted by taxes, grain shortages, and imperial decrees. The city's beauty fades, not abruptly, not violently, but gradually. A small crack in a mosaic, a faded fresco, a statue left in shadow. Nothing dramatic, and yet, the visual memory of the empire weakens. Imagine a sculptor polishing a marble column. The sun streams across the workshop. Dust clings to the floor. The sculptor pauses, perhaps sighs, perhaps notices a small chip in the marble. Hours pass. The column remains upright. The city remains standing. And yet, the slow erosion of care is as inexorable as time itself. And now, the schools. Children learn to read, to write, to memorize the works of Cicero, Virgil, and others. Teachers move slowly, repeating lessons. Students memorize, sometimes distracted, sometimes attentive. Attendance dwindles. Fewer children come from distant villages. Travel is difficult. Food may be scarce. And so the transmission of knowledge slows, almost imperceptibly. A generation begins to drift toward forgetfulness. Imagine a teacher reading from a wax tablet. His voice is calm, rhythmic, hypnotic. Students repeat lines quietly. Some pause, sigh, fidget. The day stretches. The sun falls. And outside, the empire continues, distracted by more immediate concerns. Grain shipments, coinage, taxes, barbarians. Small, repetitive, mundane pressures that slowly erode cultural life. Even minor oversights contribute to decay. A scroll left uncopied, a lecture canceled, a temple neglected, a mosaic left unfinished. Each small lapse seems trivial. Each day the rhythm continues. Each small neglect compounds. Slowly, imperceptibly. The culture that once flourished now limps forward, held together by a few diligent scholars, a few persistent teachers, a few craftsmen who remember care. And here we encounter a gentle suspense. Will the next generation preserve the knowledge? Will someone notice the fading fresco before it is lost? Will a philosopher pose a question that is answered wisely or forgotten? Perhaps, perhaps not. The empire, in this quiet, hypnotic decay, bends inexorably toward its decline. And so, we leave the libraries, the lecture halls, the workshops, and the schools. Knowledge fades. Art erodes. Debate continues with diminishing energy. Students fidget. Scrolls gather dust. The empire endures, yet its intellectual and cultural life slowly dwindles. Nothing dramatic. No sudden destruction. Only quiet, persistent neglect. And perhaps, as you listen, you feel your own mind slowing, drifting along with the gentle rhythm of fading knowledge. The suspense, subtle, almost hypnotic, guides you toward rest, toward sleep as the empire itself drifts quietly into the shadows of history. Chapter 6. Final Days. And now, we reach the final days, not in grand cinematic battles, not in dramatic speeches, not in sudden destruction. Number. Rome falls quietly, slowly, almost imperceptibly. An empire that once stretched across continents, that once pulsed with wealth, knowledge, and power, now drifts gently into shadow. And we observe it, not with horror, not with excitement, but with calm. Measured attention. Imagine the city. Empty streets at dusk, markets closing, merchants counting fewer coins than yesterday, bakers noticing a slight drop in grain supply, soldiers pacing lazily in barracks, their orders delayed or forgotten. The machinery of the empire continues to move, but it moves with weariness, like a cart trudging through mud, wheels creaking. And outside the walls, the pressures of the world, barbarian movements, rebellious provinces, natural decay, push gently, persistently on the fragile structure. Let us consider the governors. They sit in their provincial offices, scrolls, coins, letters, ledgers, piled high, disorganized, often unread. A minor dispute over taxes arises in Gaul. The governor notes it, then forgets. A shipment of grain is slightly delayed. A minor rebellion is ignored, quietly. Nothing dramatic occurs immediately. And yet, these small, repetitive failures echo through the empire, amplifying slowly, subtly, as waves across calm water. Imagine a governor, hunched over a stone desk, quill in hand, rubbing his eyes. Sunlight filters through narrow windows. He scratches notes on a tablet. Perhaps he misreads a figure. Perhaps he ignores a letter. Days pass, weeks pass, and Rome waits, or perhaps it does not. And now, the legions, Soldiers who once marched with discipline now patrol slowly, distracted, perhaps unpaid. Orders arrive late or not at all. Supplies are insufficient. Equipment is worn. Camps are quiet. Drills are repeated but with less vigor. The pulse of the army, once so strong, now beats faintly, irregularly, almost lethargically. And yet, they continue. Small disturbances, minor errors, routine activities, all echo quietly through history. Imagine a legionary walking along the wall at dusk, his armor slightly tarnished, his sword dull. He pauses to rest, glancing toward a distant forest. Perhaps a small group of raiders is spotted. Perhaps not. Days pass. Weeks pass. And the empire drifts, slowly, quietly, toward its inevitable conclusion. The economy falters further. Coins clink less frequently. Markets echo with emptiness. Grain shipments are delayed. Tax collection is inconsistent. Merchants move slowly, adjusting goods with care, counting coins repeatedly, measuring small sacks of grain. And the empire's pulse slows, quietly, inexorably. Nothing dramatic occurs suddenly. No flash of violence, no shattering collapse. Only repetition, delay, oversight, and subtle error. Consider a small market in Rome. A baker counts coins slowly. A merchant weighs grain carefully, murmuring numbers to himself. A customer hesitates, unsure of the value of the coins. And outside, the city breathes gently, quietly, a shadow of its former vibrancy. The barbarians press, not with overwhelming force, but with slow, steady encroachment. Minor raids, scout sightings, messages arriving late, reports misfiled or ignored. The empire reacts slowly, lethargically. Borders are maintained in form, but not in substance. And in this quiet, repetitive pressure, tension accumulates, imperceptibly, yet inexorably. Imagine a small scouting party of vandals approaching a frontier village. Soldiers notice them in the distance. The village prepares cautiously. Nothing dramatic occurs immediately. A cow wanders away. A small fire is lit. Weeks pass. The empire's response is delayed. And the suspense, subtle, hypnotic, persists, almost unnoticed, like a slowly falling leaf. Administration falters further. Letters are lost. Reports misread. Orders delayed. Governors distracted. Scribes exhausted. Each small failure seems inconsequential. A ledger is miscounted. A tax is forgotten. A shipment of grain delayed. And yet, these small errors accumulate quietly, shaping the empire's fate. Nothing abrupt, nothing dramatic. Only repetition, imperfection, and slow decline. Consider the scene in a dimly lit office. Scrolls scattered, quill scratching on wax tablet. A clerk pauses, adjusts his ink, sighs. Hours pass. The empire continues to function. Imperfectly. Slowly. Almost lethargically. And you may feel the gentle pull of calm, hypnotic repetition as you listen. And now, the final days. Not with a roar, but with a sigh. Rome exists. Rome continues. Soldiers patrol. Governors write. Merchants count coins. Scholars read dusty scrolls. But the rhythm of the empire is faint. The machinery groans quietly. The pulse is irregular. And then, a final letter arrives late. A shipment of grain is lost. A frontier is abandoned. No one panics. No one fights heroically. And yet, the empire bends ever so gently toward its conclusion. Imagine the last emperor seated quietly, reviewing reports, unaware of the exact hour that will mark history. A candle guttering, a scroll slightly misplaced. Outside, the city breathes, streets empty, markets quiet. The machinery of Rome continues for a brief moment, then slows imperceptibly into history. And so, we leave Rome, not in flames, not in chaos, only in quiet, gentle decline. Soldiers, governors, merchants, scholars, all moving slowly, imperceptibly, toward final stillness. And perhaps, as you listen, you feel your own body drifting in rhythm with the empire's slow heartbeat, your mind quieting, your thoughts softening, your breathing slowing. And the fall, gentle, inevitable, hypnotic, carries you toward rest.